Welcome back to Lingua Explore. My name is Alireza Naziri, and I'm your host. Lingua Explore is a personal podcast project created to introduce thought-provoking books and ideas in a way that encourages curiosity, discussion, and further explorations. This podcast is also connected to our weekly Lingua Explore discussion sessions held every Wednesday morning at Didar Cultural Center in Hamadan. Many of the topics we discuss during those sessions inspired the episodes you hear here, and many of these episodes are designed to continue those conversations beyond the discussion circle. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. And if this is your first time joining us, thank you for being here. Today's episode is inspired by the book Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do by Michael Sandel. But before we talk about the book itself, I'd like you to imagine a simple situation. Three people are standing behind a tall fence, trying to watch a football match. The first person is tall, the second person is average height, and the third person is much shorter. Now imagine that we give each person exactly one wooden box to stand. Everyone receives the same thing. Everyone is treated equally. But after standing on the boxes, only the tall and average height individuals can see the game. The shortest people still cannot. So let me ask you a question. Was that fair? Many people would answer yes. After all, everyone received exactly the same support, but others would disagree. They would argue that treating people equally is not always the same as treating them fairly. And that simple disagreement brings us to one of the oldest and most important questions of human history. What is justice? And perhaps an even more difficult question. Are equality and justice actually the same thing? These are the questions that Michael Sandel explores throughout his remarkable book. And today we are going to explore them together. Michael Sandel is a political philosopher and professor of Harvard University. But one reason his work becomes so popular is that he avoids speaking like many philosophers. Rather than beginning with abstract theories, he begins with situations, real situations, difficult situations, situations where there is no obvious answer. Throughout Justice, Sandel invites readers into a conversation that philosophers have been having for more than 2,000 years. A conversation about fairness, rights, freedom, responsibility, and the kind of society we want to build. What makes the book especially interesting is that Sandel rarely tells reader how to think. Instead, he introduces different perspectives and challenges us to examine our own assumptions. And that is exactly what we will do in this episode. Let's begin with equality. Equality is one of those words everyone uses but few people define. Most people agree that equality sounds good. But when we look more closely, we quickly discover that people mean very different things by it. For some, equality means treating everyone the same. For others, it means giving everyone the same opportunities. And for others, it means reducing a large difference in outcomes. These ideas sound similar, but they often lead to very different conclusions. Imagine a teacher giving every student the exact same textbook. That seems equal. But what if one student can't see well and needs larger print? What if another student is learning in a second language and requires additional support? Would giving everyone exactly the same thing still be fair? Or would fairness require treating people differently? This is where equality becomes more complicated than it first appears. And this is where the idea of justice enters the conversation. Justice is often described as giving people what they deserve. But even that definition raises difficult questions. What exactly do people deserve? And who decides? Do people deserve rewards based on effort, based on talent, based on needs, based on contribution? Different philosophers have answered these questions in very different ways. One of the most influential thinkers discussed in Sandel's book is Jeremy Bentham. Bentham believes that the right action is the one that products the greatest happiness for the largest number of people. This idea became known as utilitarianism. At first, it sounds reasonable. If a decision helps more people than it harms, perhaps it's the right decision. But Sandel points out an important problem. What happens when the happiness of the majority comes at the expense of a minority? Can something still be just if it benefits many people but harms a few? These questions reveals one of the weaknesses of purely calculation happiness. Numbers alone may not be enough. Another philosopher discussed in the book is Immanuel Kant. Kant believed that human beings possess dignity and intrinsic worth. According to Kant, people should never be treated merely as tools for achieving someone else's goals. Human beings are ends in themselves, not instruments, not resources, not objects. This perspective shifts the conversation away from outcomes and toward principles. For Kant, some actions are wrong even if they produce good consequences. Because justice is not only about results, it is also about respect. Then we encounter another important thinker, John Rawls. Rawls proposed one of the most famous thought experiments in modern philosophy. Imagine that you are asked to design a society. You must decide its laws, its institutions, its opportunities, its economic system, but there is one condition. You do not know who you will be in that society. You may be rich, you may be poor, you may be healthy, you may be disabled, you may be belong to a majority group or a minority group. Because you don't know your future position, Rawls argued that you would probably create a society that protects everyone fairly. This idea became known as the veil of ignorance. And even today, it remains one of the most powerful tools to think about justice. What is fascinating about these philosophers is that all of them care about justice, yet they arrive at very different conclusions. Bentham's focus on happiness, Kant focuses on dignity, Rawls focus on fairness. So, which one is correct? Sandel's answer is surprisingly simple. Perhaps the most important thing is not memorizing a single answer. Perhaps the most important thing is learning how to think carefully about the question. And these bring us back to our original problem, the relationship between equality and justice. Many people assume that more equality automatically creates more justice. Others believe that justice sometimes requires unequal treatments, considered a race. If every runner starts from exactly the same line, we might call that equality. But what if some runners have trained under difficult circumstances while others have enjoyed significant advantages throughout their lives? Would identical treatment alone guarantee fairness? Not necessarily. At the same time, pursuing fairness can sometimes require treating people differently, and that makes many people uncomfortable. The truth is that equality and justice often overlap, but they are not identical concepts. Sometimes something can be equal without being fair, and something can be fair without being perfectly equal. Understanding that distinction is one of the center lessons of Sandel's book. As we approach the end of today's episode, it's worth remembering that questions of justice are not limited to governments, courts, and political system. We encounter them every day in a school, in workplaces, in families, friendships, whenever we decided that people owe one another, whenever we decided that is fair, whenever we decide what is deserved, we are engaging that idea of justice. Perhaps that is why this topic has remained relevant for thousands of years. Not because philosophers enjoy difficult questions, although many of them certainly do, but because justice touches every aspect of human life. Michael Sandel's book does not provide a final answer, and perhaps that is its greatest strength. Instead of telling us what justice is, it invited us to think more deeply about what justice could be. And maybe that is where mindful conversations begins. Not with certainty, but with the curiosity. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Lingua Explore. If today's discussion sparked you curiosity, I encourage you to explore justice. What's the right thing to do from Michael Sandel for yourself, and continue the conversation with others. Because some questions are too important to answer only once, and some ideas become more valuable each time we discuss them. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Hopefully, in the in-person sessions, I would see your handsome or beautiful faces. Take care. See you in next episode.